Hey, all. Welcome to a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. I'm Ron Coddington, the editor and publisher of Military Images magazine. Our story for today is on an interesting topic, one that happens to me quite often when I'm researching Civil War soldiers, sailors, and others. Um, and probably the best example I can give you occurred last week. It's those unusual moments in time when a Civil War soldier seems to be reaching out to tell their story, to help you to tell their story. And so the episode that I did last Friday, my last episode, was about the soldier Thomas Sturgis Thorpe Jr. of the 23rd New York State Militia. If you watch that episode, you saw this image, and you know that I talked about how the soldier was in my collection, the photograph was in my collection as an unidentified image, and then on Thursday night, late Thursday night, I received an email from one of our columnists who had written about the soldier and identified him. So what I didn't tell you was around the time that that email arrived, I was wondering what I was going to talk about on this show on Friday morning. And I knew that it was Veterans Day, and I thought, it'd be interesting to be able to tell a story about a veteran. But I was struggling to figure out, well, what should I do? What veteran should I talk about, or veterans should I talk about? I've researched so many soldiers and sailors and others in the past. My mind was just sort of blank. And I was at that moment in time where I thought, well, I'll just sort of see what happens. I'll wake up in the morning and it will come to me. Well, I didn't have to really think at all, because as I was having those thoughts and wondering aloud what I was going to do, the email pops up, and all of a sudden, here's Thomas Thorpe and his story. And so it makes me wonder about, why did that happen at that particular moment in time? And it happens fairly often. I'll be researching a soldier, and then just randomly researching a soldier, and then all of a sudden, some of their personal items will come up for auction, or on a dealer's website. Sort of uncanny how it happens that way. One of my most interesting stories to me, one of the stories that I tell quite often, is about the soldier pictured here. His name is Dennis Edwin Barnes, and he served in the 93rd New York Infantry. This image came up for auction years ago, and I was fortunate to be the winning bidder. And I'll tell you, it came up on eBay. I was the winning bidder, and this happened, gosh, probably close to 20 years ago, at a time where the internet and the digital world wasn't quite what it is today. It wasn't uncommon back then for me to spend a month, 2 months, up to a year to research a soldier, because I sometimes have to go to libraries. I had to go to the National Archives and do research. I had to use the interlibrary loan program. I would sometimes have to travel. I would go to any length that I had to find details, but it took time. And so when I purchased when I sent my check in and got this image of Dennis Barnes, within a period of maybe a week or so, all of this information came out. I was finding his name and stories about him in the regimental history and other books, letters, newspapers. All this information came to me in a remarkably short period of time. I should say remarkable by standards of 20 years ago, back in the horse and buggy days when I had to get in the car and go do some research. But it all happened in such a quick period of time. I thought, wow, how interesting. I have to tell his story as quickly as I possibly can. And so at the time, I was also a columnist for the Civil War News. And I thought, wow, I'm going to write about him for the next monthly column. And so I finished my research very quickly. I wrote his story. It all came together just in such a short period of time. It was memorable for the depth of information and how quickly the whole story came out. Um, of course, his story ends tragically. If you can find it online, I've written about him several times. He dies in the wilderness. Just a poignant story. All the information about his passing and the aftermath. So, um, so his story gets out. I tell the story, and then soon after it appears, I get an email, pardon me, I get a letter. It was a letter from the New York State Attorney General telling me that the photograph that I bought on eBay of Barnes was actually stolen from the state archives. And of course, they wanted it back. Now, I should also tell you that at that time, as a researcher and a writer, I had a thing where I was only writing about images in my own collection. I finally changed that way of thinking because I didn't have the number of images, the volume of images to be able to tell an array of stories. But at that time, I was solely focused on my own collection. So here is the state of New York telling me that the image was stolen from the archives and I had to return it. And of course, I was able to prove that it was stolen. They confirmed that it was stolen, and I saw the records. And so I packaged it up and I sent it back. So all of that transpired in such a short period of time. I couldn't help but think, how is it possible that Dennis Barnes's photograph came up, all this information came in, I tell his story, and then I have to return the image? I almost thought, wow, was he calling out to me to tell that story? Now, I can also tell you, I've talked with many of you at Civil War shows and emails and elsewhere, and I know that a lot of you have had this experience. I don't really know how to explain it other than to tell you that these individuals come out of the past to sort of let us know that they're there and sort of reminding us to let everybody know about their stories. So, like I said, I can't explain it, but there it is. And over the weekend, I was thinking about the story of Thorpe and how I didn't mention that detail about how that story exactly came to be and my mental state at the moment. So there you have it. That's something to think about. Like I say, I know that you all have had similar experiences, especially those of you who are collectors and researchers. So there it is. That's a story for today. So I'll be back on the research trail tomorrow and we'll have a new video. So until then, happy trails.